Perfect. All right. So as we begin, my name's Dr. Aisha Boyce, and I will be moderating the session. We're going to begin. I'll be doing some introductions in just a second, but I want to begin with some important acknowledgements. So the first people who I would like to acknowledge are some of the partners and organizations who have helped to coordinate and put on this webinar series. The Mastercard Foundation, Arizona State University, USIUA, and other partner universities within this project that are located in Africa, Central America, and the Middle East. We also have an amazing team who has organized the webinar series, and so just want to highlight them. Dr. Iveta Silova, we have two amazing postdoctoral scholars working with us, Pauline Wamba and Hang Zhuang. We also have some colleagues from USIU, Gabriel Okello, Clifford Daniel, Kevin Akuma, and we have two amazing graduate students working with us, Prince Kawarsi and Minji Kim. And so just thank you all to those who have helped to organize this webinar series. This is the third in a long series. And so as you can see, we are here January 31st, 2024, but we have 4 more exciting webinar series. So please look out and register and consider coming to those as well. And to those who are just making their way in, we have started the webinar. We are recording. For those who are interested, please feel free to go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. And so we will have a few very brief opening remarks, including introductions of myself and our esteemed panelists who will also be giving some very brief presentations. Then we are going to have a moderated panel discussion for about 15-20 minutes. And then we are going to have and take questions from the audience. For those who are in the audience, we're really hoping that you will engage with us in a Padlet that we have set up. That way we don't have to wait for your questions to come in. As you have questions, feel free to just add them right in this Padlet. I've just put the link in the chat. As you can see, there's some there's some questions that you have that you can address to direct panelists, or you can also just share some thoughts and remarks or additional resources that may be useful. So I encourage you to click on that Padlet and engage with it throughout our time during the webinar. And also it will stay up so you can come back to it. So please feel to share links and resources that you think are useful. Okay. So just a few quick introductions. I'll just briefly introduce myself. Then I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then I'm going to give some opening remarks, and then we'll get started. So my name is Dr. Aisha Boyce. I'm an associate professor in the Mary Lou Fulton's Teachers College here at Arizona State University. And we are located on the lands of the Pima and Peepash people, and actually Arizona has, there are over 22 tribal nations here in the Maricopa County whose care and keeping have allowed us to be here today. And I am one of 5 faculty advisors of the eLearning initiative, and I also co-direct the STEM Program Evaluation Lab. Okay. Dr. Makute, he is the Director of Social Learning and Innovation and a Senior Research Associate at Rhodes University. He holds a master's and PhD in environmental education and has been a consultant since 2005. He specializes in formative interventionist research and learning-oriented evaluations. He works across local and international levels and has authored over 20 peer-reviewed articles and many reports. He has a commitment to history, justice, and inclusiveness. and he is a key figure in Blue Marble evaluation. He works and contributes in many regional hubs in Eastern and Southern Africa. And so we'll be hearing from him first in just a minute. Next, I would like to introduce Douglas Asante and Dr. Tom Archibald. Douglas is an instructional design support specialist and is currently pursuing his doctoral studies in instructional design and technology at Virginia Tech. He brings extensive experience in learning, message design, and instruction across diverse disciplines and levels of education. He's a certified professional of accessibility within the International Association of Accessibility Professionals and holds a certificate in learning sciences. He has a background in instructional design and has consulted and collaborated with over 20 faculty on inclusive courses for diverse modalities. His interest areas include instructional design, evaluation, and leadership, and he has a number of positions in the fields of education and technology. Dr. Thomas Archibald is the Executive Director of the Center for International Research, Education, and Development at Virginia Tech, where he is also an associate professor in the Department of Agricultural Leadership and Community Education. He serves on the board of directors of the American Evaluation Association and as an associate editor of the Journal of Evaluation and Program Planning. He's a Marshall Gutentag Promising New Evaluator Award winner and received his PhD in adult and extension education from Cornell University. His work focuses on evaluative thinking, and he's passionate about unleashing the power of inquiry to support a more just and sustainable world. And our third esteemed panelist, Dr. Michael Quinn-Patton, probably needs no introduction for many of you. He is the founder and CEO of Utilization-Focused Evaluation, is a distinguished figure in organizational development and program evaluation. He is a formal faculty member of the University of Minnesota and brings over 50 years of experience in the field of evaluation, including directorship of the Minnesota Center for Social Research. He's received a doctorate in sociology, has authored influential books such as Blue Marble Evaluation and Developmental Evaluation, and many, many others. He's been recognized with many prestigious awards and has shaped the field of evaluation. He's a former American Evaluation Association president and has an experienced consultant with many nonprofit, philanthropic, private sector, and international organizations. And so we're so excited to hear from our four panelists this morning. And so just to begin, I just want to share a couple of brief thoughts, and then I'm going to turn it over to our first panelist, Dr. Makuti. I just want to say a couple of quick things about decolonization. And I think, it's a term that has been around for a long time and is really been gaining a lot of traction within the fields of research and evaluation in recent years. And so just a reminder to some of those who may be kind of engaging with this terminology for the first time, that decolonization is the undoing of colonialism to establish independence from colonializing forces. And Smith is a great author. I'm going to put some resources in the Padlet and in the chat for you all. And we really see this webinar this morning at the intersection of two really important topics, decolonizing educational technology, which there's recently been a special issue on this, which I'll share in the chat, and as well as decolonizing evaluation. And there's been a really great open access special issue on that as well, which I'll put in the chat. And, there have been a number of concepts around decolonization, including post-colonialism, right? Meaning final and calling for the finality, anti-colonialism, right? Meaning against, as well as decolonialism, right? Which has to do with severing ties. And so decolonialism, similar to kind of culture and equity, really is dependent on time and context and can be dynamic. And so we need to know that decolonization is tied to colonization, and colonization is specific to places, desires, and times And so there are really a plurality of decolonizing frameworks. And so it's just some things for you all to keep in mind as we move forward and hear from our panelists. And so I'm going to stop here and turn the floor over to Dr. Makute. And you have, he'll speak for about 10 minutes to get us started. And then we'll go on to the next panelist, and then we'll go on to the next panelist, and then we will have a bit of discussion. So if you're having thoughts and ideas and questions, please include them in the Padlet, and we will make sure to get to them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Boyce, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I've been asked to address a set of 3 questions that are concerned with evaluation methodologies and practices that help decolonize evaluation. My responses are based on relevant evaluation and research assignments that I've conducted at, and across different scales over the last decade. The first question is, how can evaluation methodologies you apply in your work incorporate both environmental sustainability and social justice considerations? I have found 2 main considerations quite helpful to work with. The first one is applying relevant concepts and evaluation theory. To understand the complexity of context and how change is being brought about, with whom, for whom, or for what. The concepts include complexity systems thinking, transformations to sustainability, gendered political economy, and feminist perspectives of power. For example, political economy helps one appreciate and address issues of power and justice. Transformation to sustainability address both justice and environmental sustainability and pay attention to concept enrichment, methodological innovation, and real-life changes concerning environmental sustainability and social justice. The theorized evaluation approaches that I found helpful for addressing environmental sustainability and social justice include theory of change and realistic evaluation. The second consideration in applying participatory, inclusive, transdisciplinary principles-based and focused evaluation approaches to ensure that the different voices, views, and knowledges, as well as interests of the people of concern in an intervention, are sought and utilized. This is important for decolonizing evaluations by paying attention to power dynamics, knowledge and solution generation and utilization. The set of methodologies that has the potential to build agency of the agents of the most marginalized to challenge power relations towards social justice that could in turn influence ecological sustainability in systems of interest. Such processes benefit from the participation of natural and social scientists, practitioners and policymakers, as well as activists. Evaluators may serve as process facilitators in this context. The second question is, we have conducted international transformative learning-oriented evaluations. So how can evaluation practices be adapted to different cultural contexts, and what challenges do you encounter in the process? My experience suggests that evaluation practices for international transformative learning recognize the causal effect of historical legacies, power relations, capabilities and limitations, incentives and disincentives for transformation, and the potential of knowledge and solution co-production. My insights that evaluation practices can be that can help evaluate such evaluation practices to be adapted in specific contexts include doing this by assessing whether the pathways of change or interactions between contexts and mechanisms produce outcomes are grounded in contextual realities such as historical legacies, underlying equity and sustainability challenges, and the context-specific as well as the wider system of interest, dominant ways of thinking and doing. Secondly, by assessing the mechanisms of change, which include relevant multi-level policies and strategies, governance structures, and the rules that govern relationships between the poor and less powerful on the one hand, and the wealthier and more powerful on the other. Thirdly, by assessing whether the change processes are generating enabling conditions for just and sustainable transformation, and developing new political and environmental processes and solutions that best fit the challenges and opportunities in the system of interest. And finally, coming up with grounded lessons and recommendations for improving future programming. The main challenge that I've encountered in conducting such evaluations are programming that focuses on technical challenges, opportunities, and solutions, and does not pay adequate attention to the political economy of a given area of concern, and treating the specific context as if it were disconnected from the wider context and from history. The last question that I was asked to address is, as an advocate and policy analyst, what actions or steps would you suggest to leverage evaluation findings to better inform or influence policies that promote climate and cognitive justice? I would take the following steps to ensure that the evaluation findings better inform or influence policies by involving policymakers, civil society, the private sector, and activists in contributing data to the evaluation. In paying attention, in participating in report-back meetings where findings and recommendations are presented and discussed, and in collaboratively developing solutions to difficult climate and cognitive justice issues, drawing on the lessons learned and recommendations. The solutions, I think this is important, should also reveal individual and stakeholder and collective stakeholder gains. Then finally, I would also produce and disseminate a policy brief. My overall reflection is that it is enabling to conduct decolonized evaluations when the funding or the funding systems and programming is also decolonized. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So for those who've been listening, please feel free to go add a few questions in the Padlet, because we definitely will have time for discussion. And now we will turn it over to Dr. Archibald to get us started with the next presentation of thoughts.
Thank you, Dr. Boyce, and the whole team for inviting Douglas and I. We're very honored to be here with you all today. Douglas will be presenting the lion's share of our work together, but just to set it up, I want to just build on a few things that Dr. Mukute shared. One, just so as an educator in evaluation, as well as a practitioner and researcher on evaluation capacity building, for a number of years, I've been really focused on mainstreaming African epistemology and philosophy. There's a question about whether that's a sort of overly totalizing notion, like is there one African philosophy or are there many? I would say there are many, but in mainstreaming it in my education and in my work. And because if students of evaluation in Africa are forced to learn the standard evaluation theory tree, and many of which approaches are predicated on sort of ultimately Euro-American philosophies, why shouldn't American students also be learning African philosophies that can inform their work, whether they're working in Africa or elsewhere? And a big way I've been doing that is focusing on Made in Africa evaluation. Hopefully all of you are familiar with that concept. If not, there's a lot of wonderful writing out there. I also, and every time I talk about Made in Africa evaluation, I end up touching on those last 2 points that Dr. Mukute made, which is number one, cognitive justice. So it's about justice in relation to knowledge and whose knowledge counts, but then also bringing along the material side. So wrapping up with that key point on how funding systems need to be decolonized as well. For me, those are the dual interlocking elements of Made in Africa evaluation. It pertains to the cognitive as well as the material. So just finally, before passing it over to Douglas, he took my class a few years ago and did a wonderful paper on this concept. And then we had the opportunity together to actually publish the work and develop it further and publish it in the recent special issue of the Journal of Multidisciplinary Evaluation on decolonizing evaluation, which was co-edited by Bagele Chilesa and Nikki Bowman and sponsored or supported by the International Evaluation Academy. So it was a great opportunity to take a relationship that we forged in our class and then develop cutting-edge peer-reviewed scholarship on it. So I'm so excited that Douglas has the opportunity to share more about his work there with you today. Over to you, Douglas.
All right, thank you, Dr. Archibald. Want to be sure if you all see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great, good. So arguably, Ubuntu has been, at the center of the call for a more culturally responsive evaluation for Africa. And it is interesting to also know that, over the years, it has garnered so much traffic, incredibly, yes, in terms of research and presentations to that effect. Now, NOBWA, which we actually published on, is an evaluation approach, which is to reinforce the purposes Ubuntu is serving, the conversation surrounding the need for a culturally responsive evaluation in Africa. And it is also good to know that in NOBWA and Ubuntu, share some similarities, which are of great significance to, this conversation. So they both are, come up with that collective ownership piece. And then also they are high on relationships. Then in terms of decision-making, they both, look at the participatory approach to that. And they also build on loyalty and accountability. And then, of course, reconciliation. So NOBWA is a known approach to development and evaluation among the Akans in Ghana, West Africa. And it's a practice that originated with the traditional farmers and later on borrowed by the financial sector as a communal banking concept to provide empowerment and development among communities, yes, in the urban areas and in the rural, settlements. Good. So going forward, on this, it's great to also look at e-learning in Africa. So already there seems to be a glimmer on the skyline for Africa, talking about e-learning, design, development, and implementation in Africa. Good. At least COVID taught us something, which we all have to learn from. That e-learning is come to stay with us. And if we look at the benefits that e-learning presents, it can push the boundaries for us, like create more access for people, especially for working, for the working class who are able to now couple education, with their careers. When it comes to quality, if e-learning is well structured, well developed, and well implemented, we can get, great quality in our education. It also, talks about inclusion or promote inclusion, when e-learning is actually, well structured for us. And, at the moment, technology is driving economies around the world. So introducing learners, within this learning space, we realize that we kind of equip them and even help them to hone their skills when it comes to technology. So it's there to promote efficiency. However, reports coming up indicate that we still have challenges when it comes to availability of technology, internet connectivity. See, in Africa, we have to buy data in order to use the internet. So, all of these come at a cost. And then we also need the expertise, which would, take some time and some great effort to do that. Then we also have a big chunk of us, even here in the United States, who are not ready to even adopt, accept the e-learning concept. To some, it is of low quality. And so it would take time to actually get people to come to understand, to adopt and even adapt to it. There are a couple more I can just touch on, but I just want to move on to how e-learning is actually being evaluated here in the United States. So the focus primarily when it comes to e-learning, is quality and access here in the United States. And so there are national institutions, regional institutions, higher education level institutions, and even K-12, that are looking at standards and policies that should help, e-learning meet the focus that I mentioned earlier. I mean, the quality and access. So, these policies, would be implemented within various, various spheres. So we have distance learning communities like the AECT, which is the Association for Educational and Communications Technology, who are more like gatekeepers when it comes to distance learning, online learning, or let's say e-learning. See, they all inform instructional designers and I would say all who hold stake to e-learning within this hemisphere in order that quality and access can be maximized. We have other institutions like the Online Learning Consortium, EduCourse. We have the W3 consortium, who would also focus more on accessibility to create more inclusion because we need to get everybody on board, So they have standards there. We have institutions like Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission, they all have policies, programs and standards that would want to, guide how we design, develop, and implement e-learning within this hemisphere. But let's see how, it can go with us in Africa. So we are looking at what role INOBWA can actually play, within this whole conversation as we look forward to having, a more robust, very reliable e-learning implementation in Africa. Good. So when it comes to evaluation, within INOBWA, is framed around the standard evaluation, framework. So it would have the usual stakeholder engagement, evaluation design, data collection, data analysis, and application of of findings. However, when it comes to INOBWA, because of its foundations that are more communal driven, we want to look at bringing everybody on board. Let me give an example here. When it comes to stakeholder engagement, if it is more of the evaluation structure or framework that is borrowed from the global north, you realize that the objectives come forth before we even think about the stakeholders. But when it comes to INOBWA would rather want to get everybody together, and then what matters and how we're going to do it becomes the center of the conversation before even the evaluation begins. So we look at stakeholders who can come in there because we are Africans and we think, as Africans, we have our own values and we have our own epistemology. We'd want to get everybody in place so that what we do or whatever we come up with reflects what makes us as Africans. So you're looking at even local authority, looking at traditional leaders, looking at religious bodies. All of these need a representation in there. And when it comes to data collection, it leans more towards the qualitative approach so that everybody can have a voice in there. Then we are able to get together something that would represent us. And even after after we get the findings, we're able to plow all of that back into the whole program to make sure that it represents the aspirations, the beliefs, and the values of of our local our local setups. Now
Douglas,
it's very important for me to mention
just about at
briefly.
time, Douglas. Just so
Okay, great. So briefly, INOBWA is not to take the place of Ubuntu, but INOBWA is actually to expand the horizon when it comes to culturally responsive approach to evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
And I have some follow-up questions for you all as well. But we will turn it over to Dr. Quint Patton to talk with us for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to have a bit of discussion between you all. So thank you all so much.
Greetings. I'm delighted to be a part of this with colleagues here, and want to begin with my own land acknowledgement. I'm coming to you from Minnesota, the land of the Ojibwe and the birthplace of the American Indian movement. And one of the issues that especially emerges, I think, for digital education, Dr. Boyce began with a land acknowledgement. They're becoming more common, is that we not treat land acknowledgements as routine, that we find creative ways to keep them fresh, sometimes having people simply pause and reflect on it, having people who represent the indigenous land be a part of the e-learning opportunities, but that we not make land acknowledgements routine and thoughtless as they become more widely known. And so we've included local indigenous organizations in our land acknowledgements when we do webinars. I want to emphasize that decolonization as a universal concern. It's not just a concern of people in the global South. It's not just a concern of people who've been historically disadvantaged and excluded from evaluation. I've been had the privilege of doing evaluation for 50 years, and the privilege of a white male who's benefited tremendously from the past nature of the evaluation, including its colonial heritage. And therefore, we all have a burden, and those of us who benefited from the colonial nature of evaluation have a special burden to keep these issues before us and deal with what it means to decolonize. I want to reinforce the excellent issue that they referred to about decolonizing evaluation from the Journal of Multidisciplinary Evaluation. And I've done a video of that that issue that I wanted to highlight in the chat. I will do that in a bit to emphasize, and it includes the article that Douglas and Tom referred to. Themes from that issue are that community matters, social, emotional, and societal implications matter, attention to land. And these are all issues that pose particular problems for e-learning, that we not just make it a matter of cognition and passing on information, but that community matters. And you heard that in Douglas's presentation, that we deal with not just the cognitive side of learning and education, but the social emotional sides of it. And that we recognize that even though the internet and e-learning is a digital platform, people are still located in place, and that we connect to our land, which is where the colonization most often occurred. And so we have the voices of many different people to include as we engage in this kind of decolonization. As Dr. Shalesa said, the voices of those who've suffered colonization, the voices that have been dismissed, can now be put in front and inform how we think and do evaluation. And digital evaluation ought to contribute to that. When I talk about decolonization, especially in Western context, people say, well, didn't that happen 50 years ago? Aren't we past that? And so the metaphor I find helps people understand it in many cases is the metaphor of the way in which we've polluted land. And so in the United States, where I'm based, every time now there are buildings built in the cities, there's a major environmental scan to find out what kind of toxic chemicals are in the land. We've been polluting the land as part of global development and in industrialized countries in the global South. And the land pollution leads to the loss of 24 billion tons of topsoil every year. So what's that have to do with decolonization? Well, we can see the effects of land pollution. We can't see the polluting and dangerous residue of colonialism, but it's also toxic, culturally and politically. Toxic, contaminated, polluted landfills require massive cleaning and restoration efforts to make the land habitable and safe. Removing the long-term debilitating toxicities of colonialism for a more sustainable and equitable future for humanity requires massive decolonization initiatives in all arenas of human engagement, including evaluation. I find it useful to apply a systems perspective to decolonization, that we're having to deal with policies, that we're dealing with practices. You heard about resource flows from Douglas, but we're having to deal also with changed relationships, with power dynamics, and with mental models. And the mental models, including in e-learning and digital education, is especially important to look at because so much of our language is colonial language, military industrial language, capitalist language. Strategy is a military term. Task force is a military term. I recently was involved with a group of philanthropies working on equity, and they wanted to do an equity task force and conduct an equity audit. Audit is a colonial term for controlling people. It's a power dynamic term. And so we worked on the language of, instead of doing an equity task force, doing an equity circle, instead of doing an equity audit, doing an equity learning inquiry. The ways in which education itself is often conceived of in logic models is like it's a manufacturing process, inputs and outputs and outcomes and impacts, a linear manufacturing process, putting knowledge into people. Instead of understanding education as a relationship between people, with place, with the systems that we are a part of. And so in all of these things, evaluating transformation is going to require us to transform evaluation, attending to language, attending to relationships, attending to who is involved. And it involves looking at everything that we do and avoiding doing it in token ways, but doing it in ways that are really meaningful and represent a different set of values around our shared relationships with each other and with the earth.
Okay. Thank you all so much for your brief overviews and presentations. And I've been putting kind of links to resources in the chat. Also, for those of you who pop over to the Padlet, I've put a lot of resources and links there as well. And so now let's have a bit of conversation between our panelists. I have a few questions to kick us off, and then we invite questions from the audience. Please feel free to submit those in the Padlet, and then we'll make sure to get to those. And we have a few that have come before. So I appreciate and resonate with Dr. Patton's thoughts about this idea that decolonization is kind of this universal concept. And my first question for you all, and anyone can answer, is whose responsibility is it to be thoughtful about decolonization within research and evaluation? And how can evaluators and researchers do it in a meaningful way and in a way that is not kind of imposing epistemological violence or academic imperialism, right? So that we're not just taking this idea. And so would love to hear from whoever would like to kind of share their thoughts about whose responsibility is it to be thoughtful about this and do this work. And then for those whose it is, how do they do this in a way that is responsible, meaningful, and not imposing more harm?
One quick thought I have about that is that we could extend Dr. Patton's metaphor of pollution and toxicity, especially as it's filtered through the climate change conversation, so if we extend that metaphor, those who are most responsible ought to be those who were most responsible. So that would mean white men like him and me. At the same time, just like, island nations are actually doing the most to combat climate change, even though they have contributed it to the least, but because they see it affecting them in the most tangible manner. So there's also, from that level, almost a foregone conclusion about responsibility. So the metaphor there would be African scholars, like many of those on the call here, including Douglas, contributing to it from their perspective. And then just like how everyone should recycle and bike or walk if able instead of taking a personal car, there's a responsibility for everyone. So the metaphor there would be anyone who touches an evaluation, from a commissioner to a user to someone reading a newspaper article where evaluation reports are summarized, also has a responsibility to do their small part. So I think we can extend that metaphor to try to answer the question about where the responsibility lies.
Thank you.
Build on that by saying I think it's important that decolonization not get siloed, that it is in fact connected to the larger commitments for evaluation. So the International Development Evaluation Association in Prague in 2019 adopted a manifesto that all evaluations should address sustainability. And the evaluation associations, including the American, have adopted the equitable evaluation initiatives that all evaluations should attend to equity. And that in the context of the climate emergency and the poly crisis of multiple emergencies, decolonization then is linked, as Tom said, to our work on sustainability, our work on equity. These are interrelated phenomena. And let me add to that, this isn't a matter of personal values. Evaluators I talk to tend to think of, well, should I personally get involved in nation equity? If you are a professional evaluator, the profession of evaluation worldwide has made this commitment. You have a commitment to do this as a professional evaluation practitioner. And so we all are called on by our professional associations. Even though I have the privilege of being somewhat well known within evaluation, I'm not known at all outside. And when I present this to others, I present this as a professional commitment that the profession has made, decolonization, sustainability, equity, that we are all, as a 75,000 plus worldwide group, committed to this, and each needs to do it in their own place. How to begin? Stafford told us how to do this when he said, you begin where you are, use what you have, do what you can. That's what each of us has to do. Stafford Hood, quoting the great tennis star.
Thank you. Mutizwa, I saw you come off mute for a second. Do you have some thoughts?
Yes, thanks. Just building on Archibald and Michael's input. I think the only point that I would like to add or emphasize is about the funding systems. And to do that, I want to draw on the work that the Agroecology Coalition stakeholders are doing. I think one of the important things that they've been doing is to build, to develop principles around trust-based grant-making principles. And the principles are meant to ensure that the power is devolved to the people that are concerned with issues of concern. The accountability is mutual. The outcomes are not specified. I mean, outcome areas are specified, but the outcomes in themselves are something that would come out of the specific situations in which people are operating. So I think that kind of approach to grant making would be quite useful in decolonizing evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you. Douglas, any thoughts to add?
Yeah, so I think I go with what has already been touched on. I feel that I want to take it from another angle that, being inspired by, this noble approach, I feel that we all are a community and we have to be responsible, when it comes to, this is a collective thing, but not to also take out, those from, let's say, the global north. I feel that there are certain imports we can also have from there, to kind of, improve what we have. We already have systems established. We have our communities, working all right. But we also have to understand that it takes, collaboration, a universal, collaboration to kind of get, our agenda rolling. So we have to make room there, to kind of, import certain ideas and certain resources from that side to make it more responsible on our part, as we decide to go on this, journey. Yeah.
Thank you for those reflections. Okay, what are some thoughts from our panelists about the potential opportunities or challenges in thinking about issues of decolonization and equity and evaluation within this digital learning context? For example, one person has asked the question of how, and it's actually for Douglas, but I think anyone, maybe Douglas can answer, and anyone can answer, but how can we take into consideration the fact that many features of online digital learning originate from the global north?
Yes, so of course, there's always a starting point, every river has a source. Yes, that is what, Africans believe in, so definitely it starts from somewhere, right? The global north, but still, to reiterate my call for, the regionally responsive evaluation approach, which the Inobwa thing is actually pushing, we can take it and then make it our own. Yeah, so we don't have to cut out, the north, but we need to, accept, adopt what they have, and then most importantly, modify it to suit us. Yes. So of course, there are many cultures that have been exported from Africa, into other parts of the world, which doesn't make us, lose anything, or doesn't make it feel like we are also dominating out there. But it's about you knowing what is important to you, taking whatever is even beyond your borders and making it your own. So once we adopt e-learning, it's kind of, we see the best sides of it and then make it, look like ours by bringing our values, our beliefs, our identity to kind of imprint on it so that it becomes, our version of, the e-learning.
Thank you for that response. Do our other panelists have other thoughts about difficulties or potential challenges of thinking well about decolonization and equity within this particular context of e-learning and digital education in general? Dr. Patton?
One of the issues that's emerging that I think we need to look at as a community, and it relates to what Douglas was just talking about, and Tom's work with Made in Africa evaluation, is a concern that we follow the history of colonialization and colonialism as extraction. In digital education and evaluation generally, that becomes the issue of expropriation, that global north evaluators take indigenous approaches, African approaches, I'd seen other forms of indigenous evaluation and take it and make it their own, and expropriate those approaches. In order to not make that extractive, then we have to do that collaboratively. We have to do that with attribution. We have to do that in connection with the origins of those approaches, and not take them and convert them into new colonial approaches that have been expropriated from indigenous and global South populations. So attention to the dangers of expropriation, developing principles and ethics around avoiding that is one of the landmines, I think, to use the military metaphor, that we have to watch for in decolonization. We can still be extractive even as we think we're decolonizing, and repeat those patterns. They're deeply embedded.
Thank you. Mutiswa, do you have any thoughts about some of the challenges? And I also have a follow-up question for you, which I'll share as you kind of reflect on that. What are your thoughts about the way African countries can and are fostering collaborations and partnerships between themselves to share best practices and resources in e-learning and evaluation? And I'll say that one more time. So thoughts about difficulties in thinking about decolonization within a digital and e-learning context, and then also thoughts about the way African countries can and are fostering collaborations and partnerships among and between themselves.
Okay, thanks. I wanted to, I think initially I wanted to respond to the earlier question, but just give you an example of an opportunity that could be found in utilizing these technologies. In a recent evaluation that I carried out, I found it very interesting that in order to reach the marginalized indigenous people's organizations, one of the organizations doing trust-based grant making allowed for the use of WhatsApp by the local communities who do not read and write to present their proposals and then sort of give the money based on WhatsApp, oral presentations on WhatsApp. So I found that to be quite an interesting way of dealing with some of the challenges of marginalization, especially of the indigenous peoples. Coming to your question about collaboration in Africa, I think one of the main difficulties is the diverse languages that we use. So that makes sort of communication a bit complex. It requires more time and resources to do things together. But one of the key resources that are available are national evaluation associations that have already been established, and that can form the basis of developing regional, sub-regional, and Pan-African work to address this kind of challenge. So I think that's very helpful. The Blue Marble evaluation, for example, has been involved in the process of establishing an Eastern and Southern African regional hub. Although it did not focus on e-learning, I think that it's the kind of potential mechanism that can be used to address opportunities and challenges to do with e-learning. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those reflections. Okay, we have another question from our audience. Please provide insights into how Blue Marble evaluation principles can be used to evaluate large-scale e-learning initiatives. What principles would be most helpful in such evaluation to better understand the impact of e-learning in relation to sustainable development? And I can read it one more time. So insights into Blue Marble principles for evaluating large-scale e-learning initiatives, and which principles to better understand the impact of e-learning with specifically in relation to sustainable development.
Deepa, you want to go first?
Yes, please go for it.
I'll start and invite him to weigh in. So the overarching principle of Blue Marble evaluation is to place whatever we're doing in a global context, so that the word that's emerged to connect local and global is the word glocal, G-O-C-A-L, connecting local and global. And so in whatever context things are happening, whatever the content is, whatever the location is, we are a global world now. And the future of humanity and our relationship to the earth is very much at stake. So it begins by thinking about, in any given e-learning experience, what is the global context for whatever is happening. Then some of the other principles that come into play are working across silos, so that e-learning and education doesn't get siloed away from e-learning in health, e-learning in development, in anti-poverty work. The SDGs have become very siloed. But from a systems point of view, whatever is happening on the educational realm is connected to health, is connected to decolonization, is connected to land economics, is connected to anti-poverty, that we think in interconnections, and that we recognize in doing this work that one of the traditional ways in which evaluation has been framed, that is a linear, sequential, and I would argue colonial way of thinking, is to put things in linear sequence, so that we do a needs assessment, then a design, then implementation of a program, then evaluation. The Blue Marble principle is that these are integrated and ongoing, so that an e-learning experience ought not be sequential and segregated into segments, but that there's ongoing needs assessment, ongoing situation analysis, ongoing design, ongoing implementation, adaptive management, and ongoing evaluation. So that we think in more integrated, holistic ways about whatever we're doing, with the global local connection, and with our locating ourselves both where we are and as a part of a global community.
Yeah, to add on to what Mikey just said, so when it comes to e-learning, even here in the United States, I think the one motivation that has driven people to even want to take classes, in e-learning here is that factor of inclusion, So whatever the design is, one of the driving forces is that it has to be accessible to everyone, make everybody feel included. So as we get into this conversation about, decolonizing, even e-learning in Africa, going along the Blue Marble lines, we want to ensure that we don't stick to what we feel is ours alone, but we have to create an appeal, out there such that it will attract everybody. Everybody feels comfortable, joining us within our space, or even going along with our, or our, let's say, blueprint. It shouldn't be just for Africa and only Africa, but it should have a global appeal. The look and feel of our courses should be such that everybody feels like this is a home for me to study. Everybody finds a piece. Let me give you an example. When I, in one of my classes, it was a research class, so the instructor kept mentioning verbatim, and I was struggling. I went on Google, searching verbatim, and I was still not getting any results until later on, I came to understand she was talking about verbatim, which is how we pronounce verbatim in Ghana. So going forward, I came, being an instructional design specialist, I came to realize that if I develop videos and I add closed captions to them, now the user is able to read verbatim even when the presenter says verbatim. So with that, it made me feel comfortable using these resources, online. I didn't need anybody there to kind of, help me out with it. You see, when even we deal with colors, some are color blind. I mean, some have color issues. Some unable to read whether this is red, to make sure that you are putting emphasis on a particular thing. So now what you want to do is maybe you expand the size a little bit, or you kind of embolden it. So you are using many other means to kind of make it more inclusive for somebody who has a challenge to be part of that, content. So you see, that appeal is bringing everybody in and making everybody comfortable, regardless of where they are coming from, to join in. So as Africa, even though we're trying to decolonize, our approach to evaluation and, e-learning design and development, we want to think about giving it an appeal such that it makes everybody feel comfortable, to join in, create like that homely experience for everyone to kind of, join in to enjoy that. I like that, blue marble, approach to things. Great.
Dr. Makute, is there anything that you would like to add about Blue Marble principles?
No, nothing beyond what Michael has highlighted.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we've made it an hour and 10 minutes without talking about AI, but here we are. So yeah, so my next question is, what are some of you all's thoughts about AI and evaluation with respect to issues of decolonization and equity? My colleague, Dr. Aileen Reed, has an article about equity and AI and evaluation, which I'm going to drop in the chat, but would love to hear from some of our panelists about their thoughts about there's opportunities and there's challenges. And so just curious to hear some of you all's thoughts about AI evaluation, decolonization, and equity. And well, we'll see who wants to go first, but would love to hear all of your thoughts.
Sorry, Aisha. Yeah, I had a H here with the sound. So can you take it again?
Sure, definitely. So my question is around AI, so artificial intelligence and evaluation, and with respect to decolonization and equity and e-learning. Just some general thoughts. There's no specific question, just maybe some musings from you all. And I see Dr. Patton has come off mute, so maybe we'll start with him, and then others can gather your thoughts, because definitely want to hear what you all think about this.
One of the algorithms for AI at the moment, and this is all rapidly changing, is basically a crowdsourcing approach to find out what's out there and synthesize it, which means that everybody on this call ought to be putting out a lot of stuff about decolonization and make sure that it's accurate, because that's what AI is going to source when it goes to try to do something. So the more we can get stuff out there, let me suggest both a place where that can happen and selfishly a way to promote some of what we're doing. There's a relatively new global organization that is trying to increase communications across scientific areas called PEEREF, P-E-E-R-E-F, and it's a place for sharing posters and videos. And they are currently running a video, 5-minute video competition on sharing scientific findings. And I've done a 5-minute video on evaluation of transformation that I've posted. The contest is for the next 5 days. If you go to that site and vote for my video, you will get more evaluation word out there in this scientific community. So it's one example, but it's also a place to look at to put your own work. It's a place that's getting a lot of attraction for rapid turnaround, short attention spans, posting posters and 5-minute videos in the scientific community across all areas of natural, social sciences, applied. And I think that kind of platform is one of the places AI is going to be drawing upon, because it's going to have a lot of material on it. And we need to control that message, control the narrative by getting getting stuff out there because AI is crowdsourcing whatever we put out.
Thank you. And I've just put a link as well. Others' reflections. Tom, you haven't spoken in a while.
Yeah, I think in a lot of the conversations about AI in general, and then actually in particular in evaluation as well, you know, it's framed, I think, rightly as a force that accelerates and magnifies other existing forces in the world, such that when there's good, it can accelerate the good. When there's bad, it can accelerate the bad and sort of put it in hyperdrive. And so thinking of decolonizing evaluation for e-learning in Africa and elsewhere, the same risks and potential benefits that are there in terms of like Michael was saying, you know, what's being aggregated, whose knowledge, whose values are being filtered through what's being aggregated, that it's sort of a knife edge that it can fall one way or the other. So it has the potential to democratize certain processes and compendia of knowledge around evaluation. And it also has the risk of further colonizing knowledge and resources. So that's, I think, a non-answer in so much as it just calls for us to keep paying attention and not being overly pessimistic or overly optimistic, but realizing that, like so many things, it will magnify and accelerate the forces that are already part of human society, and that with intentional cultivation, we can try to get a little bit more of the good accelerated and a little bit less of the bad.
Thank you for that. Reflections, Douglas, or?
Yeah, sure. So going off what Dr. Archibald just mentioned, yeah, I mean, it can maximize, you know, the great results that we desire, and equally deepen the cracks that put us on the path to failure. But so what my concern is, you know, immediately you start pushing back on AI, then you're setting yourself up for trouble, because it's an avalanche. You know, that's how I see it, and it needs to be kind of accepted and then well managed. If you accept it, then it means that you're ready to deal with it. But if you want to push it back, it will be very difficult, because there are other ways. There are so, I mean, it puts us on that vast land with so much landmines, you know, many blind spots and all that, because the students are really smart when it comes to, you know, evaluation. Students you know, they are there already, and they are making use of it, you know, in the negative way. So it's about us accepting it and then developing new evaluation strategies to kind of integrate it, and rather even empowering students to kind of use it profitably. Yes. So if you want to use, I mean, think about how it can be leveraged in Africa. We are looking at what our goals are, what our values are, you know, what we need and what we don't need. So then we guide, you know, students along that, especially if we want to teach them how to even put in prompts to get the results that we desire. Because if you want a student, you put out, you know, a test prompt there for students, and then you specify on what you actually need from the students, then they would want to learn how to put in the right prompts there. And that is what I'm talking about regarding management, you know, of AI. So we have to, you know, accept it and then consciously plan out how we're going to manage it, how we're going to integrate it into our evaluations and assessments, you know, so that we can get the best results, you know, out of it, than leaving it there for anything, you know, we don't desire to kind of pop up in our faces.
Thank you. Mutiswa?
Just a quick point to build on Douglas' contribution. I think in addition to developing a set of core values to guide the process, one of the key considerations would be co-designing the application of IE with stakeholders that matter, making sure that it is inclusive, because that hopefully will help anticipate and address some of the potential negative effects that it could have. Thank you.
Thank you all. So we are almost at time. I think we've lost Dr. Patton, but hopefully his internet will come back on. He alerted me early on that there may be some issues. But what I would love to hear are a few kind of final thoughts from each of our presenters. I'll also note that in the chat, we have a question about how to maintain African cultures in this process. And so something maybe to keep in mind as you're kind of thinking through, you know, your final thoughts. What do you want to leave those of us who are here with thinking about, and what should we be thinking about going forward, and any final reflections each of you have? So whoever would like to go first with a few final reflections, and then I'll share the link for I'll share a couple of thoughts, and then I'll share the link for the survey. So.
Well, I'll go first just so I don't have the last word, because I don't want the last word. I've really loved in this conversation a thread that's popped up a few different times about this kind of dynamic between mainstreaming something like Ndobua or Made in Africa evaluation versus appropriating on one hand, and then also, like someone put in the Padlet, maintaining a sort of, or creating a global appeal so that even people working in e-learning in Asia or other regions could find themselves in these approaches that we're putting forward. And I think it comes back to just like Douglas also said, Made in Africa evaluation is not a rejection of Euro-American evaluation. It's an integration. There's a relationality between the approaches, but one that is sensitive to the power dynamics between those, and essentially emphasizing cognitive justice, to get back to a concept that Dr. Mukute brought in earlier in his remarks. And therefore, you know, an evaluator working anywhere around the world, whatever continent, whatever race, ethnicity, language, that they could then have Ndobua as one approach, which, yes, is rooted in a Ghanaian epistemology, but that's as one of the options to apply anywhere, and on a relatively, as much as possible, cognitively equal footing, and that no one philosophy and methodology connecting to that philosophy is rejected or made hegemonic, right? I mean, I think Frantz Fanon and others who have thought long about decolonization, Paulo Freire as well, say always be wary of the oppressed becoming the oppressor. So I don't think that's what Douglas is suggesting, but just trying to generate equity and a multiplicity of options in a way where the relationality between different ways of thinking can be promoted, because then ultimately I think that's just morally right because it's cognitively just. And it's instrumentally correct because we'll do better evaluation of e-learning initiatives if we get outside of the very limited Euro-American way of seeing the world. That's what I would like to share.
Thank you.
All right, so my final thoughts here are that I think that Africa is endowed, you know, with so much resources. You know, we're knowledgeable, we are beautiful people, we are a people who know what really works for and with us. So as we want to promote e-learning within Africa, we have to get everybody on board. Let's not denigrate the impact that even the least among us can actually have, within this process. Everybody matters, and everybody can go to contribute a lot to that. So we need that collective, approach to designing, to the conversations around e-learning in Africa. And as we do that, it will give us that confidence that we also have something, to show the world. And while we'll do that, we also want to look at how best it can connect up with the global system, such that it will create an appeal out there for people to kind of come appreciate what Africa also has, and then even kind of collaborate with us, join us, visit us, and then know more about it. I think that would set off some good confidence within, our system, everybody involved, to kind of make them, go the way we want to see everybody go. I believe in Africa, and I think, it will work.
Thank you. Mutiswa, final thoughts?
Yeah, it's very difficult to say something after Archibald and Douglas have spoken. I think I would like to emphasize the points about everybody matters and relationships between different actors. What I really want to emphasize is the fact that there are many of us interested in decolonizing funding, decolonizing programming, decolonizing evaluation. And I think it's important for us to work together, learn from each other, irrespective of some different perspectives that we may have, irrespective of the positions that we may occupy, because we've got a common object that we want to work towards. So I think that process of collaborating and learning from each other, working in the same big tent, is probably quite useful in this. And I think this is something that can be inferred from the deliberations that we've just said. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for your reflections. I don't think Michael is back on. We'll see if he pops back in the next couple of minutes here. I just want to point everyone to the chat. There's a link to a super brief 2-minute survey to give us feedback. Also, if you head over to the Padlet, there are the dates for the upcoming webinars. The next one is going to be February 20th on online learning inclusivity. And as I kind of reflect on the conversation that has been happening for the past 90 minutes, one thing that really stands out to me is this idea of shared responsibility, right? This idea that we all should be thinking about this at an individual level, on a personal level, as well as on a professional level. We should be doing this in our own individual work, but these are conversations that should be happening within our organizations, within those who put out guiding principles for the work, and those who talk about what constitutes high quality, valid, trustworthy evaluation, that we need to be including these ideas, and making sure that we're not just centering content and ideas from those in the global north, because our colleagues across the globe are really insightful and have contributed in such a good ways to think about our thinking around these topics. So again, thank you all so much for joining us. A huge thank you to our guest speakers and our panelists. Again, please feel free to revisit the Padlet, add ideas as you continue to have them. We've posted some great resources there, and we hope to see you on February 20th at our next webinar. So thank you all, and a link will be made available to this recording as well to those who registered. So thank you all, and everyone have a great rest of your week.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
All right. Do we want
Yeah,
to?
thank you very much.
Hello,
It's been a
Godfrey.
wonderful,
Yeah, it's
yes,
great to
hi,
see
hi.
you here. Yeah.
Yeah, it has been a wonderful conversation.
Yeah,
And we are looking forward to the next one again.
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So please continue the conversation and keep sharing the resources in Padlet if you have a chance. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, great.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it was a
Thank
great
you.
experience. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. I had a few challenges here, technology challenges here, but it was great. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Very insightful and very engaging. Thank you for this, and I hope to work, with you more going forward. Yes.
Wonderful, the speakers. Yeah, we really appreciate your time.